Alright guys, such Kremp again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day. So far, the OpTic revival, it seems, was rather short-lived. Despite their victory against Falcons against serious CDL opposition, they have won 0 maps this entire month. An absolute disaster again today against Toronto. Map 1 especially. The other maps not pretty either. Dashy tried his best at times, but the man that really needed to not draw a 0.7 dropped a 0.7 again. Not just OpTic though, out of the tournament. A big scalp taken again by Surge on the upper side. So much to get into today. Where do OpTic go from here? Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. It was not all bad news for the Green Wall today because, well, it was not great. But Kremp, after lots of the drama regarding Kremp over the last few days, he was at Kota today and he won his first ever race in IMSA. He's won races before, but in this level of competition, Kremp stepped up. He actually had a great race in the morning despite, I think he had an incident that, well, as he says, it broke his steering column and he ended up coming third, but first in his bronze class. But he actually just straight up won the race for legit later in the day. The guy who was leading had a mechanical issue. Porter inherited the win, but still a massively impressive result. We'll get into that a little bit more towards the end of the video because obviously we know there's been talk about Kremp from the OpTic camp. And, you know, maybe they needed to do some talking on the server today. That's not what happened. The first series that we're going to get into today, Ravens versus Gentlemate. And this was a generational masterclass by Priestahh this series, unfortunately for him. Good map won by the Ravens. Look, as I said earlier today, Ravens are good at control and they're good at search. Their weakness is hardpoint, but Gentlemate are terrible at hardpoint, it seems, based on what we saw yesterday. So great first map here from TJ. They won the search and destroy as well, go up 2-0 after the double red card. And yeah, they just look pretty lost, unfortunately, Gentlemate. I really don't know where they go from here. I think that's my concern with this roster right now. You know, these guys might be worse than OpTic as it stands, which, you know, I don't know. Like, I'd be interested to see a series between those two teams. TJ was frying the map 1 and the map 2 as well. And Priestahh was unfortunately nowhere to be found. The issue is for Priestahh, right, is that it makes things kind of difficult to analyse. Because you look at this series, they got slammed on the red cards, they then lost the Hassy end of 2. You know, none of the maps were completely crushing, but like it was never really in doubt the Ravens were going to win the series. Slasher was McPeace and these guys with a 1.35 on their heads. And on the other side, Kismet and Lynz, okay. Lunas was, you know, again, he's not playing at a particularly high pace, not where I thought he might be. When he pulls out the sub, I think he looks a bit better, and Priestahh just had an absolutely horrific series. 39 kills over 3 maps for a 0.58. And that's really not the series that Gotaga would have wanted for a couple of reasons, not least because it makes their decision from here so challenging. They're in a position, Gentlemate, certainly losing here, because you win this series, you get to top 4, you get at least 10 CDL points on the board, right? Like, this was a pretty big win in the context of things. Like, that would have put some points towards the World Championship, which they desperately need. But, of course, they are not going to accrue. And Priestahh came back in for Skyz. After Skyz had a 0.7, he got benched. Priestahh came back in, had one good series. Then, you know, it's had a really rough series here. It doesn't seem like either solution works. Now, had you tried Lunas after the major, you might have known. But they didn't. They waited a couple of weeks. And now they're really in no man's land. Look, they could have got Cobra, maybe, as an option instead. It's just difficult to imagine what you actually do at this point with this roster. Is it just totally chalked? Because, you know, you're going to drop Priestahh again? Like, bring Skyz back? Like, what's the plan now, right? Like, there's got to be another option. I imagine they just ride it out until the major and then pick up whoever wins challenges the event there. But the reality is their champs' chances, after some of the messing around they've done at the start of this season and just being bad, are effectively chalked, I would say, at this point. But this was certainly a big surprise to many. FaZe versus Surge, they played again. Of course, Surge beat them last time, but I thought, okay, let's be real. FaZe, you know, give them 2 chances to beat Surge. They're probably going to take one of the chances. And game 1 looked like they were going to. Neptune had a masterclass game 1, and frankly, again, a masterclass series. It wasn't just Neptune, though. There was this moment where Drazah is in this gunfight and gets absolutely slammed by Nep. Like, this was a huge round in the context as well, because 1v1 here gets guns. It goes 1-1. There was a big round later on as well where Simp nearly got the defuse with, you know, maybe 0.4 on the clock or something, but he didn't. That could have been FaZe up 2-0, and that could have been FaZe closing out the series 3-0, but it wasn't, crucially. Surge take the round 11, they tie up the series. Again, banger from Nastie and Neptune. Like, I've kind of been banging the drum for the last couple of years how good I think Nastie was. Certainly on that Ravens team a couple of years ago, I thought it was really solid. And it's great to see him thriving on a squad like this at the moment. Opha and Abuzah have had their moments of dropping some bad maps, but the fact that it's possible that Opha and Abuzah can have their bad maps and yet Surge are still beating FaZe, that is incredibly impressive in terms of, in my opinion, the ceiling of this FaZe team. This was after 2 maps. Opha and Abuzah were in the 0.6s, the other guys in the 1.2s and plus, and it was good enough to get on level terms. FaZe, though, dominated the protocol control, and it felt like, okay, you know, FaZe are coming into their own, they're going to close out the series, but no, a massive takeover from Nastie, most of all, on the Hicksy and Hardpoint, of course, an absolute banger map. aBeZy started really slow, he eventually started to turn it around, but it was, frankly, too little, too late for FaZe, and it goes 5. And the Game 5, brilliant performance from the Surge guys yet again. So for the second time in a couple of weeks, Vancouver's Surge have defeated Atlanta FaZe, and this is pretty remarkable, because FaZe, obviously, they won the minor last time out, they won the major before, they were my pick to win this entire tournament again, but yet Surge come in and they take them down. Nastie with a phenomenal performance on the final map. This was a big round that Surge managed to win. And this was a nice little spot here from Neptune that allowed him to get this pick. He dies, but then he gets traded up by none other than Nastie, of course. 3v2, Surge closing out, and they beat FaZe again. The ghost of Nicky D continues. O4 was having a few words over the game chat, and look, it's online COD. Can Surge do this to FaZe on LAN? That is the question. There's going to be talk about Neptune, right? Because, you know, the way that Neptune plays the game is incredibly impactful and impressive right now. Is it going to translate to LAN? We've seen before in previous titles Neptune's played and it hasn't necessarily, but in this game we don't know. I think it's too early to call Neptune an onliner. Like, let's just see what happens when Surge get to LAN, but they're looking really nice right now. Simp had a 1.2, but it wasn't enough. It was, again, losing 2 search and destroys in the series to Surge. That's what cost them. They stole the respawn on their game 4. They got the job done in 5. Nastie and Neptune both with 101 kills. Just super impressive from Vancouver Surge, right? Like, we said it the other day, and it's still true today. And FaZe do have a little bit to think about. So I don't think they should be worried. But they've now lost twice to Surge in a row. They'll probably think, ah, well, you know, it's online. We'll see what happens when we get to LAN. But still, there is something to think about there. And also it shows other teams that FaZe are absolutely vulnerable. But, you know, the series that you guys have been waiting for, OpTic versus Toronto. Yesterday, they had the Falcons tax, right? OpTic played, you know, the worst team in the history of the league, and they didn't play very well, but they did get the victory. Today, of course, was going to be a test, but against OpTic Texas, JoeDeceives in his career 0-5 was today going to be the day where things were a little bit different. You know, we didn't have Kenny's cam on a lot of the time as well, so that was causing some questions. But look, game 1 gets underway. This was the first screenshot I took because I was like, okay, OpTic have a nice rotation to P2. Shotzzy decided to play over here, which I thought was, you know, he was very out of the play. He probably needed to turn around kind of shortly after this, but Toronto, they ran through mids, they got the kills, they broke. And I think the issue for OpTic, in many respects, some of these moments they weren't playing terribly, but, like, you know, we have to hold them, and we do hold them to a very high standard. These are the world champions. The standard is absolutely on the ceiling for OpTic Texas. Anything short of that is going to get criticized, and anything right at the floor is going to, you know, people are going to clown you, right? And that's basically what's happening now, because plenty of moments here where OpTic were just getting broken, right? Like, their breaks were still generally okay, although there was one critical moment on the P1 which really cost them, but they put themselves in the blender, and they played Skyline again, I think is the first question. They beat Falcons on it yesterday. Like, did OpTic beat Falcons and think, damn, we're nice, like, you know, this is our map? I mean, I don't really get it, because they've not been very good at this, and Toronto are a team that should be good at this map, and seemingly they are. At this point, I mean, you know, it was really getting out of hand for OpTic over at the P1. Shotzzy was diving out, trying to get in the pool a couple of times, and, you know, OpTic were just getting shut down. The game was kind of getting out of hand because they got broken a couple of times they shouldn't have done, and all of a sudden it was spiraling out of control. And there was just no way OpTic were bringing this back to win. Beans was popping pieces all over the shop. He was popping 3 pieces. He had a 3-piece on, like, what, P3, when he just got the first kill. The second guy CleanX killed him. The third guy CleanX killed him. It was just one by one by one. You know, again, it's like watching a team play 8s. Like, there's really not much coordination. I think the way that OpTic try and holds the hard points as well is very questionable compared to the way that some of the other teams approach it. Like, OpTic like to play kind of spreads to hold the hill, which can work in previous games. But in this game, there's generally a tendency for some of the good teams to be like, all right, we're in the hill. One guy at least focus on the spawns. But apart from that, we're just going to stand here and fight and trade. And that seems to be a more viable strategy. Obviously, of course, it's, subjective and it varies on the hill and everything. And I'm not, a 38-time champion to actually give a proper take on this. But that's just my observation. You guys may disagree. OpTic's holds, though, are non-existent. There's no doubt about that. This round as well, I think I did actually get a screenshot of it. Yeah, this was the 0-0 rounds. OpTic had a 3v2 bomb down. Dashy gets incinerated by Beans. I almost can't even blame Dashy because, you might say, oh, it's Bell Fiber. Right, like that was a pretty crazy kill. But even then, OpTic should not be putting themselves in position with 30 seconds on the clock to get 2v3'd with bomb down. That's not acceptable. Neither is this. And I don't even know what to say about this. I'm just going to play it for you guys if you didn't watch the series, because this is a 3v4. OpTic have 4 lives to 3. Again, impossible round to lose. Surely. JoeDeceives hopped out the top window. I mean, someone made a miscom here, because either Kenny should be holding this, but he's holding the flank, or Shotzzy needs to be looking at this, but he gave it up and went to mid. Pred gets gunned, Shotzzy I mean, this is an absolute catalogue of errors. Like, this is genuinely inexcusable. It looks like ranked, no? I mean, JoeDeceives jumps out the top window, nobody's even looking at him. He gets 1, he gets 2. I think even in ranked people are watching this, to be honest. I just can't believe that the comms that led to this moment. I just don't understand how no one was picking that up, because it was obvious that's what they were going to have to do, was jump out the top, and somehow JoeDeceives gets out for free and pops 4 with no trades. This was the round I was like, oh my god, I thought it was bad, but like I didn't realise it was this bad. Beans then is just trolling, like he could have assassinated, what is this, Dashy here. But to be fair to Dashy, he was really the only one keeping them alive in the series. Dashy was gunning everyone, he was making plays, and look, he had a stinky map 1, and he's had a really bad couple of weeks. But Dashy was probably the only man really keeping them alive. Like, he was having moments. Look at him, 11 in 5, popping the defuse. Kenny has 2 kills at this point. Shotzzy has 4. Pred has 2. Like, it was looking horrific. And in the ends, it's another ultra win in round 11. I mean, again, it was kind of unfortunate, right? Like, Shotzzy was turning up towards the end, as was Dashy. Kenny was, again, double negative. And this was the way that the round played out. They traded it out to a 2 versus 2. Pred did well to get 2. And then, unfortunately, Vibredi gets blown up by an RC car. Kenny in a 1v2. I mean, it's tough for Kenny at this point, but he bursts the door down and then he gets gunned, of course. That's GG there. This was Pred getting blown up by an RC car coming out of the top window. So, some of these moments were somewhat unfortunate, but, like, OpTic put themselves in these situations, right? And it was the same story on the map 3. The story for me for this map was a couple of things, but mainly it was Kenny, right? Because to me, and I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago now, that if I'm OpTic, I'm at least considering putting Kenny on the sub, on the JaCeHaLy. And I'm not going to lie, when you put the JaCeHaLy in his hands, he looks better. He pulls it out for certain hills, and for P1 or for the, first A points here, on the Vault's control, he does use it, and he looks better with the JaCeHaLy. Like, it's blatant, no? Like, whenever I see Kenny with the JaCeHaLy, it looks more impactful as it stands. But most of the map, especially with the AR, Kenny just looks real uncomfortable. I know that Octane was talking about it. Every gunfight seems like a struggle to get the kill. He never looks like he's getting easy kills. And this map was, another disaster, really. He starts out 3 in 10. He got a couple of kills with the JaCeHaLy, but then he was back on the AR. There was a moment where Kenny maybe could have cleared out top art. It might have helped OpTic win the round, but they won it anyway. But after going up 2-1, this is where you've got to close it out on the defense, right? But they didn't. Toronto win that upcoming defense. And then they take the final round as well on their defense, and OpTic had a decent start, a decent opportunity, but they just died too many times, and it's just another map from Kenny. Like, look at the scoreboard here, 36 deaths at this point, more than the rest of his team by, again, a significant margin. And those deaths are important. Kenny was on a 6 spree here. He popped a 6 spree with the JaCeHaLy. It's got to be something for OpTic to think about, but they lose anyway, right? And I'm trying to find moments in these maps they lost to say, look, there was some promise there. But the reality is that in whatever way that OpTic lose right now, it doesn't really matter. They've lost, excluding the Falcons, their last 12 maps in a row this stage, And 15, I mean, it's 15 maps in a row if you go back to the major and you ignore the Falcons. And maybe you shouldn't ignore the Falcons, but like, I think you genuinely can, given like the level of competition that OpTic have played today and recently. So, I mean, man, I just really don't know. Like, I genuinely don't know what OpTic do. Like, they've got to be having so many difficult conversations right now, right? Because Kenny's popped another 0.7. They've got 3-0'd again, and I know that a couple of the maps were close, but really it was only Dashy frying that was keeping them alive. It's not just Kenny, but like his performance is unacceptable. I'm sure he knows that, but he can't seem to get comfortable. Again, I ask you the question, right? Like, what have they done in practice for the last week? I don't know. Like, obviously we're not going to see, and that's fair enough. They're not obliged to show us. But I just don't, like, have OpTic got any better from last week to this? I don't see any evidence of that, nor do I see any evidence they've really got any better at all since bringing Pred back in. I don't know how that's possible, but that is what it currently looks like. So yeah, intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. We're going to talk about that very interesting Cloud9 Thieves series tomorrow as well. And just to close out with this, right, so obviously I did this tweet, and I mean, look, I felt like the caption was a bit out of pocket, right? And as much as I do genuinely feel bad for the OpTic players and what they're going through and the OpTic fans right now, I think they do deserve to get clowned on, right? Like, Shotzzy at the start of the year was talking all this trash about the other teams. Now it's backfired on them. They're the ones that don't look like they know how to win. And then when Kremp, the greatest ever player, comes out and gives his perspective on the team and their difficulties and their situation, and they're talking about him being an ESPN analyst and Stephen A. Smith, and that he doesn't really understand things because he's not playing the game, among others, in a similar position. And then Kremp goes out and does his job, takes to the track and wins, and then OpTic can't win a map against Toronto. You know, inevitably, it's going to look bad. So, yeah, I ask you guys the same question as where we started the video. Where do OpTic Texas go from here? Very much interested in your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.